Welcome to the Liberty Beacon Rant, and I am your host, Roger Landry, and I'm joined every week by the very tolerant, lovely, and intelligent Paula Mathers. How are you, Paula?
Doing good today, Roger.
You're always doing good. You must have one of the most positive attitudes of anybody I've ever met. All right, well, I'm going to... we have been through so many schedule shifts and so many changes in this series. It's hard to believe, but we are on episode number 23 of the 4 weapons of mass destruction humanity may not survive. And when we originally started this series, what I told everybody was we're going to do 6 shows. And as we start the 23rd show... Paula, was I off or what? as we start the 23rd show, I'm going to make another change in the docket here. We started the 4th weapon of mass destruction, and I'll go over what those are again for anybody who might be listening to this show for the first time. And I had told everybody that we were going to be doing several shows on perpetual warfare. Today is going to be a wrap-up show for the entire series. We're going to do a little bit more discussion on perpetual warfare, and we're going to do some discussion on the other 3 portions of this series. And we're going to tie it all up. And why am I not going to continue on perpetual warfare, which is indeed a very big part of these 4 weapons of mass destruction? Because the new series we're going to be going into is going to delve into this topic on a much deeper level. So I will give you the particulars as they pertain to the health issues. And again, the 4 weapons of mass destruction humanity may not survive are, in order of immediacy, perpetual warfare, GMOs, vaccines, and chemtrails. So we will do a little bit more, and we did a bit of discussion last week on the health issues that are tied to perpetual warfare in the form of chemicals that we've used during warfare, such as Agent Orange, and depleted uranium shells, which are causing massive birth defects, and I believe I called them the gift that keeps on giving. Because to this day, in North Vietnam, they're still having massive birth defects. And if you do any research at all on Iraq and Afghanistan or anywhere where we sprayed these societies with massive amounts of depleted uranium shells or bullets or whatever, you can see the spike in the birth defects, the stillbirths, the cancer rates going up, so on and so forth. So this is how they all tie together. But as far as the political aspect of perpetual warfare, we're going to start a new series next week, and I don't think it's going to end up by being 23 episodes that this one was. This was a very in-depth series. We put out a lot of information to you. We have well over 100 links to articles either we have written or great articles that we picked from around the internet with peer-reviewed studies, scientific studies that showed you that everything we were discussing was indeed based on fact. We do not rant about something we're guessing at. And if I do, I'm going to tell you that I believe this to be true. But if I say this is a fact, then it's a fact. After 22 shows, we have challenged every single show. Any information we put out, if you have a challenge for it, or if we are wrong, or if you feel it's not based on fact, we wish for you to get a hold of us. Paula, we've never had a challenge, have we?
Not once. Oh, sorry.
Paula, you there?
Not once. I was talking. I just
Okay.
decided not to unmute my mic when I did it. I guess. Did that on purpose.
Okay, well, all right. Well, we do like to hear from you occasionally because there are actually people out there that think that you make more sense than I do, and you don't say very much. Maybe that's the reason they think that. But anyway, So we're going to wrap up this entire series today. We're going to use 90 minutes, and we're going to tie everything together. And I'm going to explain to you why. We'll cover the major points as to why the series included these 4 mechanisms. And we're going to tie them all together one more time to show that this is not an accident, this is not a coincidence, that this is all being perpetrated as a plan. You want to call it a master plan? Call it a master plan. But I'm going to show you so many ways that these things are tied together, and I'm going to reiterate on other shows where I have already given you tie points for these things, that there's no doubt in your mind that these are not individual happenstances that are just occurring at the same time, but are in fact part of a mechanism, one mechanism. But it's all health related. So I decided to clip off the perpetual warfare political portion because the new series, excuse me, the new series we'll be going into is going to deal with the madman who pulled the puppet strings. And that's not exactly the name or the title of the series. You'll get that next week when I introduce the new series. But that is the gist of it. And we'll be going over the politics of warfare being perpetrated in a perpetual fashion across the planet. And we'll go over a lot of other things that are being done that most people are totally unaware of. But again, all of this series has focused on health issues and how our health is being affected in a massive way by these 4 mechanisms. And again, we're going to start out by talking about the first one we discussed. And we'll do a little bit of a synopsis on that. Then the second one, then the third one, and finally the perpetual warfare. And then during this whole procedure, we'll be tying them together. So the first one we talked about was GMOs. And for anybody out there who isn't aware of what a GMO is, it's a genetically modified organism, which means that God had nothing to do with this, people. He made a tomato and he made a tomato. And again, I'm using that in a general term. I'm not speaking in a religious fashion. Okay? He made a tomato to be a tomato. He made it to taste a certain way. He made it to, once you pick it, to last so long before it starts to go bad and turn colors, or an apple, or an orange, or whatever. And mankind in their arrogance, and not you and me, I speak about companies like Cyril, I speak about companies like Merrick, I speak about companies, especially the biotech companies like Monsanto, like DuPont, and there's many more. But these are the ones that just pop into mind because they're on the forefront of evil. And mankind in all his arrogance stepped in and said, we can do it better. And they convinced so many people that they could do it better. And they sold it to the government that we can do it better. But what we have found out over the years is that they not only haven't done it better, but what they've loosened on mankind is a plague of failing health. GMOs are one of the worst scourges on humanity that humanity has ever perpetrated. And the reason for this is because of their massive proliferation. And again, this is the last week you're going to have to hear about any of these 4. But this is such evil, and the damage that's being done is so intense that not to have had a 23 counting today, part series on this would not have done it justice. We could have done a 60-episode series on this and still not done more than scratch the surface. But our intent was not to make you an expert on GMOs or vaccines or perpetual warfare or chemtrails, geoengineering. Our mission was to give you enough information to light a fire under you. My mission was to make you angry. I make no apologies for that. I won't back down from that even in the smallest iota. My intention is still to make you angry on every show I do. If you don't feel what I'm saying is detrimental to your health, the health of your children and future generations, then, and I won't apologize for this, you're an idiot. Because I'm not giving you hearsay. I'm giving you facts. This is all we talk about. And with well over 100 links to some of the best articles or references to some of the best research done on all four of these topics, there's no way in hell you can tell me that this stuff isn't a fact. There is no way. But nobody's going to present it to you the way the Liberty Beacon Project has. Nobody's going to tie it together the way the Liberty Beacon Project has. We have great geoengineering websites out there. And they do a great job of telling you the health risks and the evils that are associated with this crap. We have great anti-vaccine forums and websites out there, and they do a great job of telling you the evils and the health issues associated with that mechanism. We have really great websites out there that discuss the evils of GMOs. But how many of them tie them all together? How many of them can show you that these aren't four things happening simultaneously by accident or coincidence, but damn it, they're all connected together? They're part of a plan. I'm not being overdramatic here. I'm giving you facts. And we've covered a lot of those connections in past shows, and we will reiterate on some of them again today. Because this is paramount. The Liberty Beacon is not a geoengineering site. The Liberty Beacon Project and all of our websites are not GMO sites. They're not vaccine sites, and they're not perpetual warfare sites. We cover it all. Why? Because it is a single mechanism. The lowest common denominator of any issue. What's at the root of it? And the root of all four of these culminates in one group of people. And anybody who believes that four mechanisms as catastrophic to humanity, as we have proven over and over and over again through 21 shows, half of them being 90 minutes long each. Think of the hours we spent in discussing this, and well over 100 links for you to research personally. And Paula, how many times would you guess I've said Google it? Just guess.
Let's see. Out of 20-something shows here, probably 2,000 times. Would that be?
You're probably pretty close. So basically what we're telling you is that we have given you an overabundance of information, a cornucopia, a virtual plethora of information. Not only on each one of these topics, but how they tie together. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Because we're going to leave the politics of perpetual warfare off. That's going to be in the next series, and believe me, it will be explained very well. And if you think we've been in your face about this topic, the four weapons of mass destruction humanity may not survive, wait until next week. I made you a promise when we started this program that every week it would get worse. Not the show, not the presentation, but the information you were finding out about tyranny. And tyranny comes in many, many shapes and faces. It comes in a political form. It comes in the form of warfare. It comes in the form of health. It comes in the form of ecological disaster. Tyranny has many faces. So starting next week, we will delve a little bit further into perpetual warfare, but it will be under a whole new series. So let's do a wrap-up of 22 shows. Now, obviously, in 90 minutes, or about 78 minutes now, I'm not going to be able to give out all the information we gave out in 22 prior episodes. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick the high spots of each one of them. And if you wanted to listen to these, if you want to go back and find out what we said about GMOs, what we said about vaccines, what we said about chemtrails or geoengineering, there are 22 episodes sitting on Awake Radio's YouTube channel. And I strongly encourage you to go and listen to them. If for nothing else, then to get the links, because the links are all mentioned in every show, and do some additional research for yourself. I will probably be publishing within the next week an article that lists all the links we gave out in every show in this series. So it's going to be quite long. But what it will give you is a virtual encyclopedia covering all 4 of these issues. And we didn't give you links because they looked pretty. We didn't give you links because a girl wearing a bikini was in there. We gave you links because they contained peer-reviewed studies and scientific data that was irrefutable. And it's a lot. So let's start to tie all of these things together. Let's talk about the main evils of each one, and let's tie them all together. And then we move on next week. And we'll stop talking about things you eat, things you drink, things you breathe, and things that get stuck in you. But the first portion of this series was on GMOs. And again, the arrogance of mankind. We can do it better. Except they've proven beyond a shadow of a doubt they can't. One of the things that really sticks out in my head, and one of the things I ranted on the hardest, was that the biggest reason for the proliferation of GMOs was a cost-reducing factor to the farmer. The farmer would have to use, because we've engineered this corn, we'll use corn as an example, to resist bugs. If a bug bites into the corn, his stomach explodes. It literally splits open. The bug dies. So that's going to protect your corn against bugs, pests. So you're going to need to use less pesticides. We've got this really, really great geoengineered biotoxin called Roundup. And the main active ingredient in that is glyphosate, which a lot of scientists will tell you is the most evil chemical ever manufactured and put out across the globe by mankind. So the reason to proliferate GMOs in the first place was less herbicides, less pesticides. Only, what we found is that over a couple of growing seasons, the bugs got to the point where the stuff wasn't really affecting them that much, so they had to use a hell of a lot more. The weeds? Well, the weeds just morphed. They mutated to the point where they had almost as good a resistance to the damn herbicide Roundup as the crops did. So instead of using X amount of a herbicide, which, again, the biggest reason was you're going to save money, you have to use less chemicals, they're now using 300% more of this Roundup. to keep the weeds down because they've got super weeds now. Little weeds flying around with Superman capes on. Spray them with Roundup, they laugh in your face. So now you've got to use 200, 300% more of one of the most deadly biotoxins ever produced by mankind. What did that facilitate? Let's move to the next step of evil. What did that facilitate? Probably in June of 2013, a little less than a year ago, unbeknownst to us at the time, and with no fanfare and no word in the mainstream media anywhere, they doubled the amount of glyphosate that is allowed to be put on your dinner table. Now, prior to that, we had well over 1,000 scientists signing complaints and petitions from around the world from 2009 to 2011, stating that the amount that glyphosate was poisoning us, it was sterilizing us, it was collapsing the biosphere. We needed to stop it. But not just glyphosate. GMOs also were contributing to this. But glyphosate was a big part of it. And other biotoxins that were being used were a big part of this. But yet, I just told you that well over 1,000 very respected, world-renowned scientists and researchers were saying all the way up to 2011 and signing documents, either complaints or petitions to world governments to stop using this crap, to back away from it. But I also just told you that a little less than a year ago, well after this happened, well after these scientists threw up the panic button, the red flag, that the government permitted a doubling of the amount of this stuff that you and I ingest on a daily basis. So, let's put that into perspective. It's making us sterile. It's killing us. It's promoting massive disease throughout the population. None of this is a guess. And I'm not going to get into particulars today. We don't have enough time. But you have all, anybody who's heard any of these shows on GMOs has abundant proof, beyond a shadow of doubt, of anything I'm saying. All I'm going to talk about today is facts. Not suppositions, facts. So now we've got a massive amount of extremely intelligent people whose job it is to research exactly what's going on, telling us years ago that this stuff is, collapsing the biosphere and killing humanity. And then they double it. Okay. Does that make sense to anybody listening to this show? Is there any reason for that whatsoever? Because I'm going to give you the reason for that. The reason for that is they weren't perfect. They couldn't do the job as good as God did. What they found out was that life adapts. And through the utilization of these poisonous biotoxins, the weeds mutated and came back even stronger with the ability to push back against the glyphosate, requiring a massive increase in the utilization of these biotoxins. Now, anybody out there that knows anything about saturation knows that if you spray any type of a plant, plants have pores, plants absorb, okay? You spray them with chemicals, there's no way in hell you're ever going to wash it all off. So if you use 200 to 300% more poison on them, how can you sell that crop if the residual remaining on that crop is outside the original government limitations? You can't. Which would make a massive amount of all of the food grown in the breadbasket of this country and in California, which feeds 60% of this country, you would make it unsellable by law. They couldn't sell it. So, who do you think runs this government? Do you think it's you and me and our vote? Are you really that brain dead? This is one of the most corporatist countries on the planet. We have hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars yearly in lobbying on Capitol Hill. Where do you think this money goes? It goes into the pockets of every congressman, every senator, and every president. It helps them get reelected. And I could go down a long list of ways they benefit. A very long list. And how many congressmen and senators do you see serve their terms or say they're in for 10 or 15 or 20 years? And as soon as they get out, they go to work for a company like Monsanto. Or they go to work for a company like Merck. Or they go to work for a company like DuPont. Or they go to... You want me to keep going? Do some research on that. It'll knock you right off your socks. It will amaze the crap out of you. So why do you think the level was doubled of the amount of residual toxins that we have already known through peer-reviewed studies was killing us, sterilizing us, and collapsing the biosphere? Why do you think our government doubled it? Was it to protect your health and mine? Are you really that stupid? I don't think so. Why do you think it wasn't published in the MSM? Why do you think if it wasn't for watchdog groups like some of these extremely good GMO groups we have and websites we have spread across the internet, and I give huge kudos for anybody in this fight. And yes, my friends, it is a fight. It's a war. Not with guns, but it's still about people dying. Why do you think if it wasn't for groups like or organizations like the Liberty Beacon Project and all of the other really good groups out there and organizations and websites that keep an eye on these things, you would not know about this? But yet there are scientists stating when you double the amount of this toxin in the food we eat, it's not necessarily meaning that it's just going to double the reaction that our bodies have to it. There are scientists out there saying that it could triple, quadruple, 100 times, 1,000 times. There is even one article out there, and Google this, that says some of the effects on human physiology due to the doubling of glyphosate in the food allowable level, in the food you eat, could increase some of the reactions the body has as much as 100,000 times. What do you think we're going to look like 20 years from now? What do you think the next generation is going to look like? In 3 generations, and yep, I'm going to say it again, we have gone from the healthiest, most vibrant society on this planet to the sickest society, bar none. We have had a catastrophic, we've dropped off a freaking cliff in the health of this country. I'm not exaggerating. I'm giving you facts. And that was at the old level of this massively evil biotoxin. But the government decided in the dark of night, in a room with no lights on, and whispering to each other that they were going to double the level, and just don't tell nobody, they won't know. Can you even come close to predicting what's going to happen to the next generation of Americans? I can't. But I will guarantee you this. It ain't going to be pretty. That's one. That's just one point. We brought up hundreds of points over the last 22 shows. Hundreds of them. We know for a fact that pollination from terminator seeds can occur, cross-pollination. So what happens when we have cross-pollination throughout the ecosystem and all of a sudden plants can't reproduce anymore? What happens when we have cross-pollination and plants start to produce biotoxins? What do you think BT corn is? It's a corn that produces its own biotoxin. Not supposed to be toxic to you and me. It's just supposed to explode the stomach of the bug that bites into it. I've got to tell you something. How stupid do they think we are? If a substance which is in every cell of that food, every cell, every kernel of corn, or whatever, whether it's BT soy, BT cotton, BT, whatever, BT corn, is that poisonous and that destructive to a form of life, how the hell can you tell me that it will never have an adverse effect on you and me? Explain that to me. Because there's a lot of scientists out there that are saying it will, and it does, and it has. Glyphosate is responsible for a massive amount of kidney failures across this planet. What we have is a huge chunk of Europe that decided they weren't going to grow GMOs anymore. Because a massive amount of their population pushed back and said, we know what this crap is doing to us, we don't want it. But yet a recent study done on by taking urine samples from all across Europe, including the places where GMOs have been banned, have found in well over 60, and some go as high as 80% of all of the urine samples from across Europe show signs of or have residual amounts of glyphosate in them. That's a GMO! That's a genetically engineered biotoxin. So they haven't gotten away from anything. What we have is proof, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this stuff is making us sterile, that this stuff, I'm talking about GMOs, okay, in general, the biotoxins as well as the foods, is causing massive kidney failure, that it is killing the shiitake lining of our stomach, which is what we need to promote a healthy immune system, which the scientists, guess what? The scientists from Monsanto and DuPont and these other countries said, don't worry about it. Human beings don't have that. They lied. We do. And that is also another article I gave all of you proving unequivocally that the human beings do have a shiitake lining in their stomach. So, again, we were lied to. And so what we have here is a physiological attack, not only on our biosphere, but on the human physiology that is unprecedented. Why do I say unprecedented? How many times a day do you eat? A couple of times a day? 3 times a day? How many times do you snack? 80 to 90% of everything you buy in the store today has GMOs in it. We're not allowed to know that. They're not labeled. And some of the ingredients have names that have 25, 30, 40 letters in them. Do you have a bioengineering degree? Do you have any clue what this stuff is? Are you aware that every time you go grocery shopping, you are poisoning yourself and your children? I've said that twice before. And I understand the shock value that stating that has. But it's the truth. Maybe next time you see a bunch of what you used to consider tinfoil hat wearing individuals marching down your street holding up signs that say ban Monsanto, maybe you'll make a sign and march with them. Because it is a fact. You are poisoning your children and yourself. You are helping in the sterilization of your children. Will your children ever have children? If you've got a baby right now, or a 2 or 3 or a 4-year-old kid, will that kid ever have the ability to procreate? Because a lot less of us can do it today than could do it 20 years ago. And gee, I wonder why. Well, I'm going to tell you, and I've mentioned this before, and again, we're bringing up all the hot spots here. So I would have to mention this, a company called Epicite, which funded by the government, seed money from the government, produced a gene, or altered a gene, which was patented in a corn, whose sole purpose is not there to do anything else but one thing. And guess what that is? It's to make men sterile. Now, you women out there running your hand across your brow going, at least it's you guys. Let me explain something to you. It takes 2 to make a baby. If the men all go sterile, you can kiss your butt goodbye too. Because you certainly ain't going to do it by yourself. You only have to make half the damn population sterile. If you think I'm kidding, I gave out not only the name of the company, but I gave out the patent number. And you can Google that. Google Epicite. Google infertility corn. Google either one of those. You'll find out exactly what I'm talking about. And the government has hidden that so deep that it is illegal for you to push in finding out whether or not the corn you're eating contains the Epicite gene. I'm not joking you. I don't kid around here, ever. So when I tell you that you're going to the store and you're buying food that is making your children not only sick, but could very easily be making them sterile as well. And it doesn't take Epicite corn or whatever else they put the gene in by now. Could be put in soy, could be put in a lot of things. It doesn't take that for GMOs to be sterilizing you. There are peer-reviewed studies. Google it, showing that glyphosate kills sperm in men and damages the testes so that they cannot function properly. Yeah, I just said that. So GMOs are causing massive problems when it comes to our health, giving us diseases or facilitating diseases by destroying our immune system or making us sterile. All right, let's go away from that for a second. Let's go to the next one we talked about, vaccines. Let's talk about vaccines for a while. Because if there's any big pushback against anything that people who wear tinfoil hats like me, and I don't, but there's a lot of people out there who think so because I talk about this particular topic, vaccines. Vaccines have been portrayed to the average citizen as being the biggest boon in health that has ever come from mankind. The biggest health aid ever to have been developed by humanity. And nothing can be further from the truth. And matter of fact, we have proven over and over again, it's just the opposite. Well, they got rid of polio. Well, they got rid of whatever. Well, they got rid of whatever. We can give you a whole list of things that vaccines have eradicated. And I'm going to tell you right now, that's bull crap. Because if you've done any research at all, you will know that every single disease that has ever existed on this planet goes through a cycle. From the time it's introduced to the population, to the time it peaks in its effect on the population, to the time it dies a natural death. And I can tell you, if you do any research at all, especially let's use polio as an example, you will find out that when the polio vaccine was introduced into the United States for the first time, polio had dropped off by over 90%. It was dying. It was going away all by itself. And when they introduced the polio vaccine, what they found out, Google this, was that it didn't have the effect it was supposed to have, or that it was touted to have. So what did they do? Polio still exists in this country today in much bigger numbers than you're aware of. But do you want to know why you're not aware of it? And Paula jumped in on one of the episodes we were discussing and threw this information out. It's because they renamed the symptoms and called them something else. When they found out that the polio vaccine, on the 10% of the virility of that disease that remained, because over 90% of it had disappeared, was not effective, they called the disease something else. That's a fact. And if we went back to the original symptoms and the original classifications on polio, you would find out there's a lot of polio in this country today. But they're never going to tell you that. Let's hearken in the exact same argument. Let's hearken over to the flu. You want to know an evil shot? It is not probably, as far as side effects to the human physiology, it's probably not as evil as the HPV, except if you consider the fact that it is administered in a much, much larger fashion. They try to vaccinate everybody in this country with a flu shot every year. Some people are even, threatened. You want to keep your job? You want to put your kid in daycare? And a lot of other things that fall into the same line of this type of a threat, then you will get your flu shot. If you're a nurse or you work in a hospital and you want to keep your job, you're going to get a flu shot. But let's take the same voodoo science and apply it here. Okay? There are many, many different strains of the flu. Many. And just due to the fact that when you inject it into a human body, all right, when you inject somebody with a flu virus, believe it or not, they can give someone else the flu. That's also been proven, especially the strep throat. Okay? And I could go whooping cough. Oh, yeah. Massive amount of people have been getting whooping cough from the people who got the whooping cough virus, because that live virus stays active in the lining of their throat. If they cough or they spit up or whatever, they're spreading the virus. The biggest spread of the whooping cough in this country today, right now, and this was published in the New York Times. When the New York Times publishes something like this, people, you know it's a fact. They're not going to put their credibility on the line saying something that isn't true. They did a lot of research into this. More people got the whooping cough from the people who got the whooping cough freaking vaccine than any other mechanism this year. Tell me how well they work now. Well, let's go back to the flu virus, okay? Every time you inject somebody with a flu virus, just due to the reaction the body has, that virus mutates. There are many, many strains of flu virus on this planet. When they make up the flu shot each year, they guess at which strains are going to be predominant. And the flu shot you get covers a couple of them. There's a massive amount of them out there, different strains of the flu, but your shot, by mechanism of production, can only cover a few of these. There are scientists and researchers out there that say they haven't gotten it right yet. Not one time. Have you gotten a flu shot that covers, and I'm talking about the standard flu, that covers the strain that actually does show up? Because remember, they've got to produce 300 million doses of the flu shot vaccination months ahead of time. So unless you got a crystal ball, how the hell do you know which one's going to rear its ugly head? And if you've got 2 or 3 covered in that shot, and there's 50, 60, 100 strains out there, I'm going to tell you that the effectiveness of the flu shot has been considered by many scientists, peer-reviewed studies, and research done to be so close to ineffective that the possibility of side effects from the shot far outweigh getting that shot. Far outweigh. And I'm not kidding. I'm not. The chances of them getting the right flu virus and producing 300 million batches of that flu or doses of that flu virus 2 to 3 months ahead of flu season are the equivalent of blindfolding somebody, dropping a BB on the floor of an auditorium, and telling them to pick it up. But yet, you better get that shot. Well, you ain't going to have your job. Or your kid's not going to get into daycare. Or whatever. And then they tell everybody that 36,000 people or more each year die from the flu. Bullshit! Not true! The average deaths from flu each year is between 500 and 1,200 people, not 36,000. How do they come up with that number? The CDC comes up with that number because they lump in all the pneumonia deaths and all of the deaths that might be complicated with pneumonia, and they call them all flu deaths. That has been proven to be a lie over and over again. But how many people out there, when they see a commercial that says, you know, over 36,000 people die a year from the flu, and it's unnecessary. If you get your flu shot, you don't have to be amongst these 36,000 people. How many people do you think run to their closest drugstore where there's a big sign that says, free flu shots here, and get their flu shot? Vaccines have no market. They have no market. It's not like, hey, we're going to give you the flu shot for $2.99, but look right across the street at Joe Blow's drugstore, and he's going to give it to you for $1.99. Okay, let's run over there. There's no market for vaccines. There's only one mechanism to sell vaccines, and the customer is the government. Or big pharmaceutical companies are selling to big insurance companies, because that's who's paying for it. There's only one mechanism for selling vaccines, like the flu shot. And that's fear. Fear is the driving mechanism for you and I getting stuck by that needle. Because we're told if we don't, horrible things are going to happen to us. Well, let me explain something to you. Because you do, horrible things are happening to you. And we need to get to 2 other mechanisms, then we need to tie them all together. So let me finish this off real quick, okay? Because you've all heard this story before who have listened to me talk about vaccines. And I'm going to tell it again for those who haven't heard it, and I'll say it real quick, because this is the most evil mechanism that I've ever heard of with vaccines. First off, they're sterilizing you too. But we've already discussed that. And that is the flu shot and pregnant women. Pregnant women are advised by the CDC to have the flu shot to protect their unborn child and themselves. The flu shot for an adult mother, and we would presume that at least 99.999% of these women who are pregnant are adults, or at least close to it. There are some oopses in there somewhere. They get 25 micrograms of mercury in that flu shot. And the CDC says, that's fine, no problem, that ethyl mercury is not going to hurt you. Well, first off, let me explain something to you. Ethyl mercury in itself probably wouldn't. Except that when you inject ethyl mercury into the body metabolizes it into methyl mercury, which is very, very deadly. And then it remetabolizes it into inorganic mercury. This is a fact. Google it. Or look in the links I've already given you where that's proven over and over again. Inorganic mercury is the most toxic substance on this planet that is naturally occurring to the human physiology. There's only one substance known to mankind that is more toxic to the human body, and that is ionizing radiation, and that's not naturally occurring. So, I've just explained to you how toxic this stuff is, and that the ethyl mercury you're injected with is evil, but it is metabolized to a much more evil form of mercury called methyl mercury. And from there, it is metabolized in the body to inorganic mercury, which is the most evil and toxic substance of the human physiology naturally occurring on this planet. 25 micrograms in the adult flu shot given to the mother. Because the mother doesn't get this itty-bitty little teeny flu shot for the little baby in her belly. She gets an adult, full-blown flu shot. 25 micrograms of ethyl mercury. Google it. Now, the CDC says that's all great. That's all fine. It's not going to hurt you, Mama. Do it. But the EPA, which is part of the exact same government, has limits on the amount of mercury that any human being, depending on body weight, can receive over the course of a day before it's considered a toxic level, which means it's going to do bad, bad things to you. Toxic means bad. The best you can hope for in a flu shot is as an adult with 25 micrograms of mercury, as an adult, you're receiving 3.5 times what the EPA says is a toxic level. 3.5 times, think of that, of a toxic level of the most deadly substance to the human physiology naturally occurring on this planet. 3.5 times that mother gets. But why did I call this the most evil thing I've ever heard about vaccines? You want me to start tying this into cognitive disorders or dysfunctions? You want me to tie this into autism? You want me to tie this into ADHD? You want me to go on because I'm going to anyway. Why is the flu shot and a pregnant mother the most evil thing I can ever discuss on vaccines? The mother gets 3.5 times the toxic level the EPA says for mercury on a given day. That fetus shares the blood of the mother. Whereas you and I have a blood-brain barrier that keeps poisonous metals out of our brain, or does a very good job of trying to do it. It's not always successful, especially if you drink fluoridated water, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Because fluoride facilitates mercury and aluminum across the blood-brain barrier into your brain. But this child has no blood-brain barrier at all. Whatever is in the mother's blood is in that fetus's blood and in that fetus's developing brain. Now, I'm going to tell you, if the mother gets 3.5 times what's considered to be a toxic level, what do you think that fetus receives? By the EPA standards, everything I'm telling you is on their figures, on their weight, on their dose per weight. What do you think a fetus, and we'll take the average size of a fetus, not one that's brand new, it's only a couple of cells, or not one that's about ready to be born, but the average size of a fetus. What do you think their dose is? If I told you 100 times, would that shock you? Of course it would. But it's not that. If I told you it was 500 times the most toxic substance to the human physiology on this planet, would that shock you? Of course it would, but it's not that. If I told you it was 1,000 times what the EPA says is a toxic level, would that shock you? Of course it would, but it's not that. If I told you 2,000 times what the EPA says is a toxic level. Remember, this is a fetus whose brain is just forming and has no blood-brain barrier, and it's being assaulted with the most deadly toxin on this planet, the human physiology. But if I told you 2,000, would that make you gasp? Of course it would. But it's not that. It's 2,500 times. Because the EPA says that fetus, the average size fetus, okay, midterm, should receive no more than 0.01 micrograms of mercury before it's a toxic level. 0.01. Okay, the mother just got 25 micrograms. The fetus is not supposed to receive more than 0.01 micrograms. Do the math. If you think I'm kidding, look at the EPA. Check for yourself. How many times does 0.01 go into 25? 2,500 times. Why am I pissed? Why is there so much autism? Why is there so much dementia? Why is there so much ADHD and all of these mental catastrophes that are soaring in rate over the last couple of generations beyond anything our government says they can understand? Bullcrap! They know exactly what's causing it, and we have published articles proving that the CDC has been hiding documents since the late 90s and the early 2000s whereby they knew that the thimerosal in these vaccines, the ethyl mercury, was a huge causative factor for these mental dysfunctions. They knew that by their own documents. So what did they do? They told you they were going to take they were going to take the thimerosal out of the vaccines. And the only time you're ever going to hear me say this, to their credit, they did. They took it out of all but one vaccine. The flu shot. But guess what? While you wasn't looking, they started sneaking it back into the vaccines again. Now, can they say, in the early 2000s, we took thimerosal out of just about every vaccine that was ever out there? Yes, they can, and they can still say that today. But what they're not going to say is, but did you know we're putting it back in the vaccines? Did you know that at least 3 of the vaccines your child is going to get has thimerosal in it? Again? Did you know that? Do you think I'm kidding? This is a fact. And you know how I feel about that word. And I'm talking about the shots your very small, teeny tiny, itty bitty little baby's going to get. Who doesn't have a developed blood-brain barrier to block that mercury from getting into their brain. This is not a joke. It's not an exaggeration. I'm trying to piss you off. Intentionally. And I won't apologize for it. Because unless I can build a fire under your ass, you are not going to go out and do anything after listening to this show. I don't care if you go out and do research just to prove the old screaming idiot was wrong. I win. Because what you're going to find out is I'm not wrong. I don't care if you do it out of spite. I don't care if I'm the one you're angry at because you don't like the way I'm presenting the show and you just want to make me look stupid. I don't care. I don't care why you do it. I don't care why you get angry. I don't care why a fire gets lit under your butt. I just want to put one there. How many people in this country are being affected by vaccines? How many people in this country are being affected by GMOs? All right, let's leave that to the tie point because we got one more to go to. Actually, two more, but tying in the perpetual warfare and the health aspect of that, we can do that very quickly because that's so blatant it's insane. But let's jump onto the chemtrails, okay? And I'm going to give you the most evil there. And there are a lot of more mechanisms in vaccines we haven't talked about today, but we have talked about in the past. There are a lot of other parts of vaccines, not just the metals. We're talking about the viruses. We're talking about the formaldehyde. We're talking about a lot of other mechanisms contained within those vaccines. Take a look at the ingredients of a vaccine sometime. What you're going to find in there is going to make you shudder. The same thing with the GMOs. It's not just that they're making us sterile or they're screwing our kidneys up. They're doing a lot more than that. But we don't have time to cover all of the evils. And the fact that they're destroying the biosphere, and when the biosphere collapses, people, I don't care if you're Superman or what, you're dead. The biosphere is what keeps all of life on this planet going. And we have well over 1,000 very, very smart scientists and researchers telling us we might be at the point of no return in the destruction of the biosphere. So now let's go to the chemtrails. Let's talk about their most evil points, and then we'll do the tie points one more time. Okay? I talked about aluminum in vaccines. And I told you how toxic aluminum is. And that stuff is injected right into your bloodstream. Well, maybe not exactly right into your bloodstream. You don't mainline it like somebody would heroin. But they stick it into a muscle, and the muscle bleeds right into the right into your veins, or because muscle is basically just saturated with small capillaries and veins and arteries, and so it just about goes almost directly into your bloodstream. But what about chemtrails? Well, chemtrails are geoengineering. Our government doesn't like to say chemtrails because people like you and me who discuss these things have given that name a very bad connotation. Very bad. It's associated with evil. You say chemtrails, people immediately the hair goes up on the back of their neck, or they call you a conspiracy theorist or a nut. Those are the reactions you get when you use the word chemtrails. But geoengineering, everybody puts this is something there to help mankind. This is there to protect mankind. This is there to save us from our own inequities through the massive proliferation of greenhouse gases. And I'm telling you right now, nothing could be further from the truth. as I've stated and proven on more than one occasion with vaccines and with GMOs. The truth is always 180 degrees out or the opposite of what the party line is. Well, I can tell you that exactly, again, with chemtrails. It has been proven that through the spraying of our atmosphere, the chemicals and the substances we're putting in the atmosphere are much more harmful and will kill humanity off faster than global warming will. Not kidding. Not kidding at all. So why would they be using geoengineering then? What's in this stuff they're spraying on us? How about if I told you unidentified inorganic material? How about if I told you desiccated blood cells, which might or might not contain a myriad of viruses? How about if I told you mercury? How about if I told you copper? How about if I told you strontium, barium, irradiated barium? Okay? How about if I told you mercury or aluminum? Gee, wait a minute. Didn't I say that about vaccines already? Yeah, okay. Let's just skip right by that, though. What kind of aluminum is in chemtrails and why is it there? Well, one of the articles I gave out in the series portion we did on chemtrails was the patent for a specific mechanism utilized to spray aerosolized aluminum particles or nano-sized particles of aluminum. Yep, there's actually a patent number out there. So if anybody tells you that this stuff don't exist, throw the patent number in their face and say, oh yeah? Then why did they patent this for spraying aerosolized aluminum from planes? Well, I can tell you what they're telling you it's for. And I'm not even going to push back and tell you that's not what it's being used for, in some respect. But if you spray out nano-sized particles of aluminum in an aerosol fashion, it spreads very quickly. And since they're nano-sized particles, they have a great hang time. They don't fall to the earth very quickly. They stay up there for a long time. And they do settle because they have some mass and they're in a gravity well, so eventually they're going to fall to the earth. But not very quickly. And they're nano-sized particles. And they're used to reflect the sunlight over a given region to cool the planet. Now, could they in fact be used for that? Probably. Probably. But do you know what the side effect of nano-sized particles sprayed by the ton into our air is? It falls to the earth. You breathe it in. You have no choice. You have to breathe. And once you breathe it in, these are nano-sized particles. They're so small that they can pass through the lungs into the bloodstream and be carried via the bloodstream. Well, aluminum, Google this, is extremely toxic and damaging to the brain and the central nervous system. But we have, and I've just mentioned this a little while ago, a blood-brain barrier which helps to limit the crossing of poisonous metals from the bloodstream into the brain. Hey, we're all safe. It's not as bad as the screaming old man was going to say. Wrong! Because something else pops into the picture here. It gives it just a nice little evil boost. Why do you think so many of these communities haven't pulled fluoride out of their water, knowing the evils that fluoride by itself can do to the human physiology? Let me explain one of the things that fluoride can do and does very well. You go outside. They were spraying this morning, so you go outside and you sit on your porch this evening and you take a tall glass of water with you that you poured from the tap, pop a few ice cubes in it, ice that you made from water that you took from your tap, and you go out and you sit on your porch, and you breathe. And what are you breathing in? A crap load of nano-sized aluminum particles, which pass right through your lungs into your circulatory system and takes it right to your brain, where all stop, or for the most part, blood-brain barrier coming up. But then you drink the glass of water that's full of fluoride. And guess what fluoride does? Fluoride facilitates the movement of metals across the blood-brain barrier. So you're outside, sitting on your porch, rocking back and forth, sucking the air in, drinking your glass of water, and bam! You're killing yourself. You're dumbing yourself down. You're killing brain cells. Am I being, I don't know, theatrical here? No! Am I exaggerating this? No! Am I lying about any of this? No! Because everything I just told you, you can Google or find in articles we have put in these shows every damn week. Everything I just told you is proven. Fluoride does facilitate, Google it, poisonous metals across the blood-brain barrier. Chemtrails are laden with nano-sized particles of aluminum that fall to the earth very slowly. So they're hanging just above the ground and you're sucking them in. Because, hey, you can run from the vaccines with the aluminum in them. You can homeschool, you can get a job where it's not mandatory, whatever. You ain't got to take the vaccines with the aluminum in them. But I dare you to stop breathing. I dare you. And I'll bet you $100,000 you can't. And I'm guaranteed to win. Only because I know that eventually you're going to suffocate and die. You have to breathe. What do I consider to be the most evil part of chemtrails? The dumbing down of America. We've all heard that term. Well, I'm going to apply it in a fashion that's physical. Not due to the MSM propagandizing us. Not because we sit in front of our TV every day and listen to their crap and play our video games and don't worry about the tyranny going on around us. That's what most people in the liberty movement call the dumbing down of America. I'm talking about the real dumbing down of America. The physical dumbing down of America. I'm talking about breathing in toxic metals and facilitating them across the blood-brain barrier through fluoridated water. I'm talking about videos you can find right on YouTube, Google this, which show you mercury or aluminum nanoparticles being exposed to live brain cells and watch them wither and die right before your eyes. I'm not exaggerating. There are films on YouTube where you can actually watch this happen. And the amount that these brain cells are exposed to are the equivalent of what is in a shot, a vaccine, or what is in the air that you are breathing. Now let's tie these together through that one factor. In case you guys haven't guessed who've listened to past shows, I use aluminum a lot because the evil quotient is so very high, and it makes tying all of these three mechanisms together so damn easy. We know we have aluminum in vaccines. It's right on the vaccine package. We know that we're getting, just like mercury, if you take a look at the EPA limit on how much aluminum the human physiology can absorb over the course of a day before it's toxic, and you look what's in the vaccines, you already know that it's above what the EPA says we should be getting. You already know that if you get a shot with aluminum in it and your fetus gets that shot, which the fetus will because you share your bloodstream with them, that it's hundreds, if not thousands of times more poisonous to them. So we know the vaccines are laden with aluminum. Many of them are. And again, that's just one evil. Don't want anybody out there to think that that's all that's wrong with vaccines. Not by a long shot. And we know that we're breathing aluminum nanoparticles sprayed from above. We know that for a fact because we know why the government says they're using it, to reflect sunlight. And even if they are, that makes no excuse for the fallout from it or the evil of it. We know they're doing it also because I actually have patents on the equipment that was developed and patented to do aluminum aerosol spraying in the upper atmosphere. So we know this is happening. And we know that these are particles and they have weight and they will eventually settle to the planet. So now we know we've got aluminum in vaccines. Now we know we're breathing, that's getting injected into our body. Now we know we're breathing in aluminum nanoparticles. And that it's being facilitated into our brain and our central nervous system via the fluoride in the water, which we're just about every community in this country, not all of them, but just about every one of them has fluoridated water. So how do we tie in the third leg of this, which is GMOs? All right. The only way that the fertile lands of the breadbasket in California, which is where 99% of our food is grown in this country, or I would say 95%, 60% alone in the state of California alone. California grows 60% of the food we eat in this country every year. So the only way that soil will ever get saturated with aluminum is through aerial spraying. There is no other way for that soil to be saturated with aluminum. Think about it. There is no other way for it to happen. And we already know we're being sprayed with aluminum. Nanoparticles. So how do we tie GMOs in? And a lot of you have probably heard me say this, but again, I'm on my most evil point of all three of these. Okay, Monsanto has just patented a whole string of seeds that can grow in aluminum-saturated soil. Because regular corn cannot. Regular soybeans cannot. Regular alfalfa cannot. These plants will not grow in aluminum-saturated soil. They won't grow. It's toxic to them. So Monsanto has developed a string of seeds that will grow in aluminum-saturated soil. Gee, let's stop and think about that, okay? Chemtrails aren't real. They're not spraying us with aluminum. Aluminum's not going to hurt us, but Monsanto has developed a line of seeds that will grow in aluminum-saturated soil, which can only be saturated with aluminum due to aerial spraying. Anybody push back against that? Anybody don't believe it? You want a patent for the aluminum-resistant seeds Monsanto's developed? That was in one of the articles I gave you, too. Why the hell do you develop aluminum-resistant seeds to be grown in the heartland of America if you're not spraying that land with frickin' chemtrails saturating the soil with aluminum? Now let's take the evil one step further. Then we'll tie everything together one more way. How do plants grow? They take nano-sized particles of nutrients and water and whatever from the soil and minerals, and they suck them up through the roots and they use them to grow. But not everything that's brought in through the roots is utilized. Thus, you have other stuff that doesn't really get metabolized, and I guess that's the proper word, I'm not sure, by the plant as it grows, but it stays there. So we're growing corn in soil that's saturated with nano-sized particles of aluminum. And the corn can grow because it's been genetically modified to exist and grow in soil that's been saturated by aluminum. Anybody anybody out there think that some of that aluminum isn't going to get sucked up in that corn? Is there anybody out there stupid enough to think for even a second that you're not going to be eating corn and tomatoes and green beans and peppers and everything else that's going to grow in this aluminum-saturated soil isn't going to end up in your GMO fruit or your GMO vegetables or your GMO whatever? Now, we know what aluminum does to us. We know that it is especially toxic to the brain and the nervous system. We know it dumbs us down. So now, we're eating it, we're getting injected with it, we're breathing it, and the water we're drinking is exacerbating it. How the hell do you get away from it? You can't. They got you. And they got you coming from every single direction. So we know that each and every one of these mechanisms are being utilized in some fashion to attack the human physiology. Where does perpetual warfare come in there? The fourth and final peg in this board. Last week we discussed that. We discussed the chemicals that were used. Let's harken back to one that should be probably fresh in everybody's mind, even though you might not have been born when it happened, you've heard of it. And that's the Agent Orange spraying of a lot of North Vietnam, a lot of Cambodia, and parts of South Vietnam to defoliate it so that the Viet Cong could not move weapons and troops under the foliage canopy where they couldn't be spotted by high-flying planes. We know that to this day, 40, 50, 60 years later, birth defects are still rampant. The ground is still saturated with this stuff. Their genes have been shifted. They have one of the highest birth defect rates on this planet, bar none. And let's go to something a little bit more recent, but just as obvious. Let's go to the utilization of depleted uranium shells and bullets. Look, do me a favor. Google the birth defect rate, the stillbirth rate, the spontaneous abortion rate in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and soon to be, because that's a relatively new job we just did, in Tripoli. In Libya. Want to talk about a gift that keeps on giving? We have radioactive waste, basically, laying all over the countryside. When we went into Iraq, we used shock and awe. We saturated them with bombing, with bullets, with shells. There's millions of these things laying around. Do you think we've sent in work details to pick up all the bad stuff and take it out? I don't think anybody listening to this show is that stupid. It's the gift that keeps on giving. We've killed over 3 million people in the Middle East to date. Well over 3 million people. These are the people we've shot with guns. These are the people we've bombed. These are the people we've made homeless so they died due to exposure to the weather. These are the people that get caught in crumbling buildings. These are the people, 3 million of them. But that is a drop in the bucket to how many we have actually killed or will die or won't be born as a result of what we have done. The 3 million we have killed to date is the tip of the iceberg, and over the next generation or two, that number will rise to 10, 20, maybe 30 million that are either maimed for life, born with birth defects, stillborn, spontaneous abortions, or whatever. And what's the half-life of this poison crap that we have littered all around their country and we're not picking up? For many generations to come, the number we are responsible, not you and me, but our government and the people who pull the strings of our government are responsible for killing will continue to mount in ever-growing numbers. So now we've got all of the people we've killed in perpetual warfare. all of the people who we've killed with vaccines, and there's a very long list, all of the people we have damaged for life, who will never live a normal life because of vaccines, all of the people who are sterile and will never have kids. So how do we even count the dead when they won't even be able to have kids? And all of the people who are getting extremely dumbed down and having, I don't know, brain damage and central nervous system damage on a scale nobody has ever done a study on. When's the last time you heard anybody did a study on the fallout from chemtrails and what over the last 2 generations that they've been spraying? Because they've been spraying for about 30 or 40 years. It's been increasing as time went along, but they've actually been doing it for well over 20 years. Has anybody done a long-term study on the effects of this on human physiology? Why is the sterility rate screaming up in this country? Our government doesn't know. They're telling us they don't know. We're the most GMO'd, we're the most chemtrailed, and we're the most vaccinated society on this planet by a huge margin. And we have the highest and quickest increasing rate of infertility of any country on this planet. Gee, does 1 and 1 make 2 in your book? Because it doesn't mind. This crap didn't start until a little less than 3 generations ago. Well, we started declining to the sickest society on this planet a little less than 3 generations ago. But this is a coincidence, right? We can't tie these together. Just because they all have aluminum and everything we're doing, eating, breathing, getting stuck into our body with needles all has aluminum in it, that's just a big coincidence, isn't it? Don't worry about this. This show was just a big joke. It was supposed to be funny. It's satire. Don't believe anything I said. Try and convince yourself this is a coincidence. Please, try. All 4 of these mechanisms are being perpetrated simultaneously on humanity. And there's only one result of all 4 of these being done at the same time. It won't happen tomorrow. It won't happen next year. And it won't happen in a decade. But we've gone from the healthiest to the sickest society on the planet in 3 generations. What the hell do you think humanity and America are going to look like 2 generations from now? And I will leave you with that. And that has been the intention of the series, The 4 Weapons of Mass Destruction Humanity May Not Survive. Take me seriously or don't. But if you don't, after all the proof you've been given and all the information you've been given, the only person you're hurting is yourself, your children, and their children. And I leave that to your conscience. Thank you, Paula.
Thank
you there, Paula?
Roger. Yes.
Oh my God. Yeah, I really almost blew a gasket on this one, but wait till next week. Anyway, thank you, Awake Radio, and anybody else who might be simulcasting the Liberty Beacon Project